Okay, we are live. Let's see what are our media assets are. What do my banners look like? It's murder. Mm-hmm. Here we go. I'm gonna turn my camera off real quick. Let's go close this thing. This is gonna bother me. Alrighty. Still didn't close it good enough, but it's okay. It's not. The sun is sunning. I keep trying to like get it to go away. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I want to see if I can add one more thing. Oh, we can go live on Instagram. We're just waiting on everyone to join. If anyone's going to join, just giving it a little second. I'm setting myself up. There's one thing I wanted to look for. There it is. Okay, there we go. All right, so today is day 3, and we are talking about vendors. So I'm just opening up my notes. There we go. Perfect. We are all ready. Music's going. Hello, everyone. Alrighty, so just to recap where we have been over the last couple of days, we have discussed your different types of event professionals and what exactly their roles are and how to best select which event professional will work best for your event, whether it be a wedding or social event or corporate event. We've also discussed budgeting. So yesterday we took a deep dive into what a budget should look like, how you should set it up, and what you can actually expect as like this placement of numbers. I'm trying to adjust my camera so maybe you guys aren't so close. Okay. Yeah, so we discussed exactly how to outline a budget. We actually plug and played some numbers just so that we could actually get an idea for what the cost of a wedding would be. The biggest thing that you will need to do as a next step from deciding your exact event professionals, and I always say to decide those first because they will help guide you through some of these next steps. And if you choose to hire them throughout the middle of the process, then you might lose some of the qualifications and experience that they have to be able to source the correct vendor. Okay. So we are just going to dive right on in. Not out, but in for all my YouTubers. Okay, and so the first thing that we are going to discuss, and I wonder what this looks like. I can't see. Okay. I can't even see the screen. Here, okay. It seems like it scrolls at the top for Instagram. So we're just doing a little live test here for a second. There we go. I can see it. It looks good. All right, good. We're good. We're good. All right. So the first step that you're going to do is define your scope needs. So you need to clarify what is required, what is your event date, and even if you don't have a set date, at least your proposed dates, your time period that you are looking to host your event or your wedding. You definitely want to. I thought that I got rid of this lighting, and it is bothering me so much. I hate that I moved my desk here. It's okay. Hopefully that got rid of a little bit of it. It doesn't seem to. Um. All right, that might be a little bit better, but we just got to work with it. I shouldn't have put my desk against the window. But yeah, so we are. You're going to define your required needs, your event date, the timing of the event, whether it be a full weekend, 3-day conference. Is your wedding going to have multiple moving parts? All of those different details you want to get outlined for yourself. You also want to, let's see if I sit up, does that help? I'm just trying to get rid of this lighting. It's blowing me. Okay, and then you want to also determine, again, like we've already discussed, your budget range, and the expectations that you have for those vendors. So in that, you want to try to really outline that with your event professional. If you don't have one, then your next best steps is just to get a high level overview of what your expectations are. Typically, you probably would like to start with your venue first, but again, all of these things still align with you contracting your event professional. So I put this here before your venue, but technically you kind of want to do these things in the order where you choose your event professional, you go through this process of their vendor, and then they help you, the vendor process, and then they help you source your venue. For the sake of today, I went ahead and started with the vendors, and then we're going to go to the venue tomorrow. So if you have your event professional, they will kind of help you guide through some of these things to define your scope and needs. If you don't, and maybe you did start with your venue, then you kind of want to review what, your needs are for that, because you may be jumping right into needing to hire AV or something like that. And so you want to make sure the comments are getting a while. You want to make sure that you have just defined your scope and your needs, no matter what it is that you are sourcing for as it relates to either your venue or your vendor. Okay. The next thing that we are going to talk about in your step 2 is your research and your short list of vendors. Okay. So you want to try to reach out to all of your friends, any of your family that has had a similar event recently that you enjoyed. You want to do some research. TikTok is always a great source. Instagram, a typical Google search for exactly what you are looking for the vendor to actually do. So you want to identify those that align with your style, the scale, your budget, and your goals. Okay. So that is definitely something that you want to do. You want to outline that. Yesterday, we discussed a particular procurement process where you want to be able to source 3 different vendors, and then you be able to cross-reference what those vendors are offering. And even if you want to select a certain vendor, you want to see what other vendors are offering so that you can be able to negotiate the best contract with the one that you are interested in. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm always going to go for the cheapest one, or I'm always going to go for the one that does God knows what. And in reality, you want to go with the one that best aligns with what your needs are and that give you the best bang for your buck. And sometimes that does not mean that they have the lowest price. They might have a higher price, and they might include a lot more than the person with the lowest price. And so that's why you want to do that competitive analysis of 3 different vendors so that you can be able to determine those needs. And then also what I always say, and as we talk about the negotiation of the terms, if you have one vendor that says, hey, I'm offering 12 hours of service, you get 3 people on call, and you're going to get, some type of term in there that is beneficial to you. But then your next vendor is only offering 10 hours of service. They're giving you 5 hands, to assist you. And they also have a 10% discount for you working with the venue that you're using. So you might ideally want to go with that vendor, but they're losing 2 hours of service, but they're adding 2 hands on deck. So you want to kind of just weigh your options and see what it is that you're looking for in that and go from there. Okay. I did a bit of overlap, but we're going to move right into the actual request of availability and proposal. So a term that people are not always fluent with is an RFP. It is a request for proposal. That is what we're at right now. So 1 second, I'm still working. All right, cool. All right. And so as you send a formal inquiry with event details requesting price, inclusions, and terms, that is your RFP. A lot of times if you go to different websites for vendors and such, and you go to their contact me page, that is essentially an RFP. You place a lot of the details that we've discussed thus far into the comments or the description area if they don't already have a form that completely requests all of the details and information that they require in order to give you a complete proposal. Okay, and so as you outline your request for proposal, you should start to receive those back. It is also important for you to give a deadline for that so that you can be able to make your decisions in an appropriate timeline. So, some people might respond back to you within 24 hours. Depending on how large your request for proposal might be, which, with AV companies or production companies, it does take a little more time, 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes it does take some follow-up and an actual consultation call for them to really envision what it is that you need. They also need to typically source a lot of the equipment and the hands that they would need to pull off your project, or your event. And so with that being said, you definitely want to just set a deadline that works best for your RFP, and make sure to include that in whatever details that you submit, okay? The next thing that we are going to talk about is the review of the proposals and the comparative options. I have beat this topic with, this is my client. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. So the review of the proposal and the comparative options, you definitely want to evaluate the cost, the experience, the reviews, flexibility, and the available, not just the price, their availability and not just their price. I have beat this topic again with a dead horse even yesterday. As we were talking about budget, the price is not your only determination for who has the best proposal. You always want to look at their experience, their reviews, how flexible are they? A lot of times when you are in this phase, you might not have all the details required. And sometimes you might also even need them to place some expertise into this. You're going to an AV company, you don't know what all you might need. You want a screen, you have a general session, you have some breakouts, but you don't know what is required within that. And so you definitely want to get with someone that is experienced enough to advise you on how to execute your event. If you're looking for a cake vendor, you want to make sure that they are giving you a cake that is going to feed 200 plus people. If you're sourcing, entertainment, you want to see what types of equipment do they bring with them. So like if you're hiring a live band, a lot of times they might bring their own equipment, but they're going to need certain equipment equipment to be able to plug into the AV system. And so sometimes there is some overlap that is required there. So you want to make sure that they are not only flexible and able to work within your AV team, but you also want to make sure that they're aware of what equipment they're bringing and what equipment they need. They might need some type of soundboard. They might need a certain plug, a C port versus a USB. All of those different things are required within these proposals. And so if you notice that one vendor is asking certain questions that another vendor did not ask, that is also a red or a green flag, depending on who you're looking at. If you get back, a proposal from someone and they just sent you a number and they called it a day, but the next person is like, hey, do you know what time your load in is? Do you know who is going to be my point of contact here? Do you know if you have this available at your venue? All of those things lets you know and gives them more credibility, and it shows that the expertise around drafting the accurate proposal. Because the other thing is, and I do want to lift up that oftentimes you might get a vendor who has propose something to you, you guys have agreed, and now when you're actually in the planning process, they realize they forgot this, that, and the other, and now your bill is going higher than expected. And also you could have potentially worked with another vendor who had all of that included in their proposal and it was at a higher rate. So you definitely again, I cannot stress this enough, do a comparative analysis amongst each vendor that you choose. If it's not something simple like a cake or, someone that is, doing, any types of gifts or something for your attendees that is, pretty straightforward and it's just something that you want, then you definitely want to compare your vendors. You want to make sure that they are giving you the best offering and that they're not going to jack up your price after you've contracted, because these numbers are not set for all of the vendors. For your cake, it's going to be set. If you don't change your flavor, if you don't change the size of the cake and all of those kinds of things, then you're not going to expect any type of increased rate in your cake. But anytime you have a vendor that is actually providing a complete service throughout your event, they are providing equipment, they are providing labor, they are providing any types of actual physical product to you, then they have an opportunity to increase your rate after contract. And granted, this is something that has to be agreed upon, requested, that should be in writing at some point. But even if it's not, if it's something that you just say, hey, I want to add this, they're going to add it to your bill and then you're going to receive it at the end of the day. Okay. So you definitely want to make sure that you review and you compare all of your options throughout the process so that you can make sure that you are making the best decision possible. Okay. Next, we're going to go into negotiating your terms, okay? So again, some of this stuff is overlapping. I've kind of already mentioned how to negotiate, what you're looking for. But as you really get into the process and you're negotiating those terms, make sure that those negotiations start off in writing, that you are clear about what it is that you are expecting, to add to the contract. Get on the phone, talk through that, and then follow up with those details in writing as well. And so, like I said, if you've done the proper comparative analysis with at least 3 vendors, then you have some speaking points to speak to as you negotiate your terms. Definitely with like hotel contracts and such, you have opportunity for what they call concessions. Concessions means you get a free room for every certain amount of rooms that are reserved. You might get, 10% off your AV order. They might give you some extra, Bonvoy points on whoever the hotel is that you're sourcing. You might also receive, a discount in other areas for other vendors. So, say your AV company, they might offer a discount on, equipment or something like that. They might be able to connect you with other companies that you can order things through at a discount. All of those different things are negotiated terms that you want to get ahead of in the beginning, okay? That is something that you definitely want to start with. What does it look like for, any changes in the request? what are the clauses that are included in your contract, and how am I supposed to navigate those things? You definitely want to make sure that those terms are clear, and that contract has every type of contingency, risk management, force majeure, all of those different terms that go into the clauses, that those are all present and accounted for as you negotiate your terms of your contract. And like I said yesterday, we can actually pull up my exact contract that I use and go through some of those terms just so that you can see what a full contract should look like from a vendor, okay? Take a little break and take a little sip. Okay. Next, we are talking about how to. I'm sorry, I didn't read the blurb. Let's go back. 1 second. Let's go back. I'm not a teacher, guys. I'm just here. What happened to our music? Gotta go turn us on some tunes, please. All right, cool. Okay. I did not read the one-liner for negotiating your terms, just so that we're clear. You want to basically make sure that you are confirming your pricing, your payment schedule, your deliverables, overtime rates, cancellation terms, and contingencies. So those are your terms in a clear, concise sentence on what it is that you should expect in negotiating those terms. And like I said, I will show you guys a contract that includes all of those terms, okay? All right, so now you want to confirm contract insurance, okay? When you confirm your contract and your insurance, you want to review and execute the contract. So that means I've reviewed it, I've sent it to my legal team, I've sent it up to my client and everything else for them to understand what the terms are that we are both agreeing to, both the vendor and the client. There are terms within the contract that both of us are agreeing to. The payment schedule, that is an agreement that the client is making. The deliverable schedule, that is an agreement that both the client and the vendor have to agree on, because sometimes a vendor cannot move on their deliverables without the client supplying the information that is required. I see the hearts coming through. Thank you. So you definitely want to make sure that you include that you are reviewing all of those details, and as you sign that contract, that you are understanding what it is that you're agreeing to. And a lot of times, once you've signed that dotted line and you are responsible for the deposit, you are responsible for whatever else the case may be. Even if you sign on that dotted line and 2 weeks from there, you decide to cancel the event, you are now under contract and required to go through whatever that cancellation policy is, even if there is a non-refundable clause in there, okay? So the second half of that is your insurance. You want to collect your certificate of insurance if required by the venue or the client or the vendor, okay? So your certificate of insurance can be purchased online. There are several different sites that provide, event insurance. They're typically about $30 to $50, depending on the size of your event. Your vendor or your venue or your client will let you know exactly how much of that will be required. So sometimes venues might say, I need $1 million policy. I know that seems alarming, but it's really not when you go through those different websites just to purchase that certificate of insurance to make sure that you are covered, okay? Scrolling. Okay. So next we want to talk about submitting your deposit and your initial payment, okay? That is going to be very clear in your terms and conditions. That is something that is going to be outlined with a payment schedule and a due date. Just because you sign the contract doesn't mean like figuratively your deposit is due at signing. That has to be something that is written. Sometimes your deposit could be due a month from now. Sometimes you have a 2-week turnaround, sometimes it is due at signing. So you definitely want to be clear on what it is their payment schedule is and get that deposit submitted on time. How I judge my clients is how they submit their deposit or payment schedule. If I have a contract with you and you still have not paid me my deposit and it's been due for 30 days, obviously I began working in good faith for that client. as soon as the contract is signed, because it is a contractual agreement. But if you do not make your payments in time, then that lets me know how this working relationship is going to go. So I definitely always say make those first, second, and third payments on time. If you start to need some back end support, as it goes later on, as a wedding planner, I am okay with sometimes pushing my, payment schedule behind if I know there's another vendor overlapping. And, we're all human. Sometimes you got to wait to that next payday and all of those things. So, I can be understanding and make those accommodations for that. But that is only for the clients that have paid me on time thus far. I'm not going to make those concessions if you didn't pay your deposit on time, if you didn't make your first payment on time, and now you're expecting me to make some concessions for you or to continue to work on something. So if you have not paid your deposit in due time, that lets the vendor know exactly how you're going to be as a client, and it's not going to be good for you. Okay. So, I definitely just, say, to make sure that you pay that required retainer on time, to hold that date in, to lock in your services. Okay. Next is to make sure that you receive written confirmation. Obtain a signed contract in return and a payment receipt confirming that the vendor is secured. You want to make sure that any payments that you're making to a vendor are through a secured site, and then that you receive an invoice and a receipt of each payment that is made to that vendor. Do not pay any vendor in cash without a written document or invoice showing that you have made that payment. If you skip past everything that we've discussed and you do not have a contract with that vendor, they have not sent you anything formal in writing, do not pay them. Do not pay them. That is how you get scammed. You want to make sure that your contract is in writing, that you have an agreement that is clear and concise, and that it is in your possession, not theirs. So also, a lot of times vendors might send you, something that is through DocuSign, or something that is through, some type of third-party website, QuickBooks, all of those different things, where they'll send you the invoice, you pay it, and then, you might not receive something back, or it just confirms your payment, but you don't have a receipt of that. You definitely want to make sure that you download those contracts. So say you signed a contract in DocuSign. When they ask you, do you want a copy sent back to you? Always click that button, because if something were to happen to that vendor, which is possible. We're all human. We don't know how many days we're going to be on this earth. So if for any reason something happens to them tomorrow, and especially if they have other people that work within their business, you want to be able to show this is what we were working on, and or you want to be able to have something, if required, to go to court or anything else, that you have all of the documents that you need. So you always just want to make sure that everything is in a written confirmation. Again, we've also discussed if for any reason, your services or your scope of work begins to change after the contract, you also want to make sure that those things are in writing. You want to make sure that, hey, I told you that now I have, 5 breakouts instead of 3 breakout rooms. You need to put that in writing, so that when the day of shows up and, whomever is actually running your event, because oftentimes the people that were building and, working through your contract and your point of contact, they're not always the one that is actually going to be executing the labor. And so that labor that is being executed is just a piece of paper that is given to someone to set up for your event. And so if they don't have the proper documentation of what the changes are and the things that you have discussed are too, then for those that are asking who I'm speaking to on TikTok, I am actually on live on Facebook and YouTube as well, and Instagram as well. So I'm on live on all platforms. Okay. No problem. It's fine. I just set up the live on TikTok because TikTok doesn't really have the whole streaming situation. So I had to separate you guys onto my phone and everyone else. So if you guys do want to join in and watch the actual live that I have going on, you can go to either Facebook at Jasmine Reeves or Enjoy Events. You can go to YouTube at Enjoy Events, or you can go to Instagram under I'm Jasmine Joy. And you can actually see what I'm placing on the screen, because I do have some blurbs and words that are going on to the live stream. Okay. So where was I? In the middle of my thoughts. Yep. So I think I've covered enough of the written confirmation. Just get everything in writing. You always want to. Oh, I know what I was saying. And so when those people are actually setting up those breakout rooms, or they're actually putting the equipment out in the different rooms and such, if it's not written and confirmed that you now have 5 breakout rooms, then there's going to be some confusion. And sometimes if you don't have an event professional, or you don't have someone to follow up and double check those things, then the ball can get dropped, and you don't even realize that that ball is dropped until those people are actually headed to those breakout rooms and they're not set up. It's happened before. You also want to make sure that within the hotel, sometimes, say you have a gala and you've sold seats and tables to people, and there's an expectation that my table has 8 chairs. I have a table that is placed here, or I'm requiring 52 tables because I've sold 52 tables. Well, again, like I've stated, a lot of times those different things and who is actually setting that up is only looking at a piece of paper that was given to them through a chain of command, and now they're required to set it up. Oftentimes, those people aren't necessarily going to say, I counted each one of the tables and it exactly 52 tables. Sometimes they're rolling them out. Somebody else is pulling the tables down, sitting them in the room. The next person is breaking them down. Another person is actually adding the chairs. There's a lot of overlap when it comes to labor. And so you want to make sure that there is one person that is going to actually come into that room that is on the side of your, the client, and an actual event professional that is going to double check those things. And I know it sounds very tedious and monotonous and borderline micromanaging, to say that I'm in there actually counting tables and chairs. But if it's something that is a paid event, you absolutely want to do that. You absolutely want to make sure that that is taken care of. If you have a conference with a general session or something like that, you can kind of flex it. A lot of times all of the attendees don't all show up to every general session. A lot of times some attendees prefer to stand up because they know they're going to be sitting down all day. All of those different things, you have some flexibility. But your galas, your fundraisers, any type of plated dinner and such, you definitely, thank you, girl. You definitely want to make sure that you count out those tables and chairs. You want to make sure that that is taken care of, because the last thing you want to do is someone who's paid, $1,000 for a table, $1,000 for a seat. I'm actually working an event next month that you have to purchase the tickets in pairs, and it is $3,000 for 2 tickets. So you're talking $1,500 per seat. I'm going to have to go in that room the night before, the morning of, and even sometimes in the middle of the event, and make sure that those tables are still accurately there, that someone didn't go up to the table and pull a chair and decide they want to add it to all of those things has been done and can happen. So you want to make sure that all of that is accounted for and taken care of. And so that just goes back to some of that written confirmation that you want to make sure of. And oftentimes, I'm just going to add this little tidbit in here. Sometimes that written confirmation is just what you call a CYA, a cover your situation, because in the moment it is kind of nothing you can do if that table is not there or those chairs are not there and you're standing there with the guests. The only thing you can do is hope that the hotel moves as fast as possible to rectify the situation. But in the meantime, when it comes down to who is responsible for that ball drop, you want to have that written confirmation for your post-event debrief and all of that stuff to go back and say, hey, I submitted this to you in writing on this day. It was not done. How are we, justifying this? What are you guys going to do? Are you going to, give me a discount on my food and beverage so that I can be able to give some money back to my paying client? All of those things is how you're going to be able to leverage any of the follow-up that is needed because the ball was dropped in that process. So written confirmation is always important. It's always important. All right. So now you have contracted your vendor, you have written confirmation of the contract, you now have been passed on to the next person, because oftentimes, if it's not like a one party business like myself where I, can hire out or something like that, but typically you're going to be dealing with me throughout the entire process. There are some larger companies such as AV companies, hotel management, all of those kinds of things where they actually have a sales department. And so once you're done with the sales and the contract of the process, now you actually go to your event manager. As we talked about the professionals and all that, you might have an event coordinator, event manager, you might have, the lead point, the project manager, or the lead point of contact for the AV company, all of those different things. There are going to be some transitions here. And again, circling back to that written confirmation and that transfer of information, you're never going to talk to the salesperson again. When you go through a hotel and you're reserving your space, your salesperson, unless you just happen to see them walking the halls while you're there for your event or a site visit or something like that, they're not going to be your point of contact anymore. You can circle back and include them if things start to become a little rocky with your experience, with your event manager or something like that, just to be able to say, hey, I need some help here. But other than that, they are not going to be involved in your thorough planning process. So you want to make sure that as you transfer your as you get transferred over, that you're documenting who your next point of contact is, and that you're actually adding that to an event timeline and a vendor grid. Okay. So let me make sure I read you guys my one-liner for that you document your load-in times, you document your contact information, your responsibilities, and the key deliverables of that vendor, and you're pulling that out of the contract and putting it in some type of grid. Again, this is because now you're going to possibly have to be sharing those grids with other people. If you have a graphic designer, you're going to need your graphic designer and your AV team to be in cahoots, because you don't want your graphic designer to be putting some type of, LED backlight something on the stage, and now the AV team can't stream the stage onto the monitor because the lights are glaring it out. It gets really, really detailed here. And so, having that grid and being able to share that out with others is always important. You also want to just make sure that you don't drop the ball and forget that you've contracted a vendor. Again, if you have a lot of moving parts, you have a lot of teams involved, if you're working with a corporate or you're working with a destination event, you want to make sure that all of those different details are clear and concise, and that you're able to follow up on those. So, say you hired a vendor for what is something that is just a one-off. What can I think of? Okay, you might have a caricature artists. I think I said that right. So like the people that do the little doodles and the designs and all that kind of stuff. And you hired them today, your event's in another 6 months. They're hired, they're taken care of. You signed the contract and you never added it to the vendor grid. Now it's 6 months later, and you might have vaguely remember that you hired someone, but you can't remember who it was. You don't remember their name. You're searching your email high and low to find that contract and that person. And they didn't put the name in the title. The title just says invoice. It doesn't say anything about a caricature artist or anything, all of those kinds of things. And so now you've lost who that vendor is. I know that is a stretch, but it can happen. It can definitely happen, especially when there's a lot of hands in the pot. So you just want to make sure that you are documenting for yourself who your vendors are, and that you are able to pass that information or share that with other vendors, because sometimes they need to work together, Another example, your event designer, your florist, they need to be in cahoots. If they're not a part of the same team, they need to have several conversations with each other, because you want to make sure your floral and your event design go hand in hand, okay? So that's just I'm just throwing out different points there where you're like, oh, okay, I can think of that. Yeah, that makes sense kind of thing. And so then the last thing that we're going to discuss as it relates to vendors is maintaining the ongoing communication. This isn't the end all be all for vendors. We can go for days about how to actually execute day of and all of that kind of stuff for the event, but that would be too many moving parts and too many details that we have to get into. So we're just going to stop here for a high level purpose of maintaining the ongoing communication. You want to schedule your check-ins, you want to confirm final details, and you want to confirm 7 to 14 days before the event. You definitely want to have what they call for conferences and on a corporate level a pre-con, but a pre-con can be for any event. It's just your pre-event meeting. So you want to have all of the powers that be, all of the different vendors and everyone else that is going to be involved in executing the day of to have some type of meeting. You typically want to do that as early as 3 days prior to your event, depending on the situation. Sometimes if it's through the hotel, they'll schedule it when you arrive on the property, however soon that might be. But you definitely want to do it no later than 3 days prior to your event, if I say so. And then, it could be anywhere between 7 to 14 days out that you have some type of follow-up with each individual vendor so that you can have the one-on-one time with them as well. So you definitely want to do a one-on-one meeting with the vendor, and then you want to have all of the vendors sit and have a discussion, because again, your load-in schedule, who's going to do what first, who's putting out what first. So prime example, you want to make sure that your event designer, who might be responsible for the table decor, the plating, and all of that kind of stuff, that they're loading in and setting up before your florist gets there to put out the centerpieces. Why? Because the tablecloths need to be on the tables before the centerpieces get placed. Or you want to make sure that your graphic designer has scheduled for all of the graphics and things that need to be actually placed in the design. On the stage, that they come after the stage is built. Why? Because they need to put stuff on the stage. Your furniture rentals, if you're going to get furniture, you oftentimes want to make sure that those furniture rentals are coming at a decent time and at a time where the person that is delivering the furniture can take it and place it in its exact location and leave it there. You don't want the furniture rentals to be dropped off and now they're just sitting over in the corner, and now you have to find someone else to move that couch and place it where it's supposed to be if you don't have a team for that. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes if you have a large budget and your event designer or your wedding planner or someone might have a team to set all that up, and then they just decide, hey, get the furniture here and we'll place it. That's totally fine. But if this is something that you want to make sure that the company places the furniture, you want to make sure that they bring it at an appropriate time to actually place it where it needs to be. Okay. That kind of covers the ongoing communication. Obviously, it's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of meetings, all of those things. And so as we move forward I'm going to pull up, because I didn't already pull it up, I'm going to pull up my contract real quick. And we'll just kind of go over some of the terms and conditions in that before we end for today. Right on time. Let's see. X notes in my notebook. See your face. One second, guys. So I might have to remove some names. I don't think I have. I feel like I had a Y'all, I gotta get a new computer for Christmas. All right, let's change this. We're just doing a quick edit here. Okay, hold on one second, guys, because I totally forgot that I was going to do this, and now I'm trying to place the correct logo here. Okay, cool. And then we also are going to remove my address because y'all don't need to see that. Okay. And then everything else should be good. Okay. So, okay. So let's share our screen. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-mm-mm-mm. Okay. Alrighty. And let's make this a little bit bigger for you guys to be able to see. All right, I think that's big enough. Okay, cool. And then can we do um, view full screen? Okay. All right. Get rid of all the fluff. Ooh, ooh, too fast. Okay. So here is a standard service agreement. This is my actual service agreement. There is a bit of a different one for weddings, but not too much. Same kind of concept, just it changes words out like wedding versus planner, all of that kind of stuff. Wedding couple, all those kinds of details, things that are more related to the wedding. All right, so this is what I would say needs to be included in any standard service agreement. I would also say that you want to make sure that as you hire vendors, that if you notice that their service agreement is a little sketch, it's not including a lot of the details, that you either counter them with your own agreement, which you can definitely do. Let me take this off screen. A lot of people don't know that you can actually give a vendor your own service agreement and they can still sign it on your behalf. A contract is a contract, anything in writing. If you have something on a piece of paper and it has terms and conditions for what it needs to be executed and it is signed by both parties, it is still a valid contract. So, all right, so as we just read through the service agreement, this is a service agreement that is entered on whatever day it is that you are signing the contract or the contract has been sent to you. It is between Enjoy Events and Travel, as well as to insert the client name. As you see throughout the document, the names will be listed as either service provider and client, as opposed to like rewriting the name each time. And this agreement serves as an agreement that the service provider will perform services as set forth below. You always want to make sure that your contract has your contact information. So how can they contact you? You want to put your client's point of contact information. So their first and last name, their address, email, all that kind of stuff in the contract. And that is going to be the set place that you're going to reach out to them. So say they have multiple emails and they're like, I actually want you to contact me on this email. That's where I'm most responsive. Or here is the number that I want you to contact. Or here, say that the client wants you to now work with their assistant or something like that. Then you're going to put that point of contact information there. You also want to put your contact information as a service provider. So your name, your address, the city, state, the email address, as well as the phone number. You want to make sure that all of those details are there on your behalf as well, because that is probably what they're going to put on any additional documents about who you are and such. And so you always want to make sure that that is clear. The first term or clause in my contract is the actual term. This agreement will begin on the effective date and remain effective until the completion date, unless terminated earlier as under this agreement. Any extensions of the term will be subject to mutual agreement with the parties. So, Obviously, once the wedding is over that Sunday, technically the contract is over, but I don't necessarily put an exact completion date because obviously there's still probably some payments that might be outstanding, some follow-up that might be required, all of that kind of stuff. And so it is just until the project is actually completed. And oftentimes, for sometimes with certain clients, if we're going to have the same structure of business. So I have a client who pretty much calls me for their virtual webinars that they do weekly, sometimes monthly, depending on, the time of month. Most recently, the last 4 weeks, we did a 4-week session. And so their process is pretty much the same. They hit me up, they let me know what the times are for the event. And, I send them an invoice afterwards. So I don't need an updated contract for them unless my hours change or something like that. So she did reach out to me and say, hey, what is going to be the rate for, these 4 sessions that we already know we're going to have? So I did send her over an estimate or whatnot, but, the contract that she initially signed is still under the same terms and conditions. So we just followed that. If for any reason the scope changes and she's like, hey, I want you to pull up to this hotel and still run the virtual management process. Okay, I'm going to send her a new contract because some of those details might have changed or it might require a different rate for me or something like that. But typically within my contract, it discloses all those different details and what are the requirements under all circumstances, because again, you want to CYA yourself in this. But this isn't about being a service provider, so let me hush. All right, next you're going to discuss in the contract the description of services. So as we talked about that RFP process and the estimates that you might receive, I either attach the actual estimate or proposal that I sent to the client. So if it is something that we had in writing prior to about the contract, I'll just attach that here. If there needs to be any type of outline or list here, like so say that we're going straight to a contract and we didn't do like an estimate, then I'll just go ahead and put what the service, the description of services are here, and that is outlined there. I'm not going to read you guys throughout my whole contract. I mean, hey, if you want to pause it, you can read it. So then we're going to talk about the performance of services. I'm going to highlight a couple of different points here, just on a high level of what is included here. It discusses, that I follow the U.S. calendar year. I take, all of the holidays off. I am typically going to be off on Saturdays and Sundays unless discussed or assigned through the project. If I need to rearrange or change my schedule, I need a week in advance. A minimum of 12 hours notice for more straightforward tasks. So if you call me and you say, hey, Jasmine, I need you to source a cake provider or something by tomorrow, then you have to give me at least 12 hours notice to do that. I can't do I'm not always going to be available to drop everything I have to do that. So you at least want to give me up to 24 hours notice. The next clause here is understanding the role that as me being your provider, I am an advisor and a manager, and that I will make selections of that I will refer you to suppliers or service providers, but at the end of the day, the client will make that decision, and then they will also make those payments. The client is responsible for that. The service provider can use the judgment and act in regard to changes, whether tardiness, non-performance, based on the situation, time limitations, and your wishes. So we talked about budget yesterday and like how, if any weather changes or anything like that, I'm going to actually work with my best expertise to help pivot in that. If you're at your hotel and you're getting ready for your wedding and it immediately starts raining, I'm not going to call you and say, hey, it started raining, I'm making pivots. No, I'm going to be acting in due time, in real time to execute whatever it is we discussed as a rain plan. And then I'll call you if based on our discussion, you said, okay, call me once you have to order the tent, or you say, call me, and let me know, when we're actually going to start, all of those different things. But we would have discussed that in our previous meetings, based on your wishes. But, beyond that, I'm always going to operate within my expertise and kind of follow up with you afterwards. I reserve the right to assign someone to the project. So say I realize that I need an assistant, I wouldn't charge you additional for that if that's not something that you requested. If it's something that I feel like I needed, then that comes out of whatever my rate is. And then I will just notify you that now I've brought in an assistant, and that they'll be working with us on the day of. We go over cancellation clauses, that if for any reason I do choose to cancel, that the service provider may substitute, service provider being me, I may substitute a new supplier or provider with or without advance notice to the client at its discretion, and any additional costs are to be paid upon only upon the client's approval. So if I do, say I get sick or something like that, and I need to provide you with another person, or say my assistant has to step in a higher capacity, again, that is something that I do not necessarily have to say that I'm bringing in my assistant and that they are operating on a higher capacity. But if for any reason I'm not going to be on site or something like that, then I do have to at least provide you with another professional that is just as good as I am, and then you can approve that or not if you so choose. The client gives permission to allow the service provider to use any of the photography that is set up on my website, and then I'll name the photographer. So, if I take any pictures, I can use the photographer's pictures, anything like that. If I want to put it on my website, I can, as long as I just, give anybody the credit that is due. Same thing about the in return, if the client, if you're having your wedding and the photographer takes pictures of me setting up something or whatever, then my client is able to use those pictures. Like, the likeness is mutual between the two of us, so each of us can use the pictures. All right. The client shall not change the date, time, or location of any event without first contacting or advising me in writing, and making sure that I am still available. If you do change the date, time, and location, and I'm not able to provide the services, in that case, then I am now released from my obligations with the agreement, and I am not responsible for any non-performance or anything like that. So say you're like, I changed the date of my event, and you hit me up and you're like, instead of my event being October 10th, it's not going to be October 12th. Are you available? And I'm like, no, I have a whole nother wedding that day. At that point, it's like, that's not my fault. That was not my doing. I am now released from the contract based on what you signed. As we talked about, there are all the terms. So if for any reason there's an act of God, weather, car accident, COVID, all those different things that might come up, in the event the service provider shall not be reliable for any compensation or damages due to non-performance that result in any incapacitation, non-arrival, errors, or omission of any type. Some things we just can't help. If I am hospitalized for something, or if my transportation or something is disrupted or breaking down, then there is a clause here that protects me, and that just makes me have to notify them and give them the right due time. But, life is not something that can be controlled. Now, when we talk about transportation breakdown or disruption, it's not like, oh, my car, I got a flat tire and now I'm not showing up. This is like, if I had to catch a train, or I had to catch a flight or something like that, and the flight was delayed or, canceled due to weather, all of those different things would be a transportation breakdown or disruption. To be clear, it is not, my tire is flat and now I'm just not going to show up. No, you better call an Uber and leave that car on the side of the road. So, just to be clear on what types of conditions those are. As I've always stated, the agreement can be modified in writing at any time, as long as it's acknowledged and sent via email. Both parties approve, we're good to go. The service provider, if any task is considered outside of the service provider's authority, then the service provider will inform the client, and they will come up with a mutual agreement for further action. So say my client is like, actually, I want a balloon arch. and I'm like, hey, we didn't agree to that. I don't know how to do balloon arches. We need to hire someone else. At that point, it becomes your decision if you want to hire someone else, what's the budget on that, and then also who we're going to contact and consult for those services. So that's just an example. All right, so payment and compensation. This area changes depending on what type of payment terms that we've discussed. So sometimes if it is an hourly, then I'll put it there. And there's some terms for my hourly contract. Oh, you can, I think I have it in my notes here over here. Let's just scroll over. Yep, you can see that. So, okay, you can see that. Maybe a little bit more. All right, there you go. All right. So if it is a weekly compensation, which this is not written right, but if there's a weekly compensation, then it would be, how much that you pay for each payment. And so it'll let you know what date that we've agreed on. I'm going to send my invoices. Say my client says we do payment processes on Tuesday. Okay. So then my invoices need to be submitted to you by Monday, or Friday or Thursday, or whenever the case may be. The service provider will send the client an invoice to record and document financial transactions between the parties. The client understands that they are responsible for paying the vendors and products and services in full. So, if there is a full compensation for the services provided, then we'll put that flat rate here, and then I will send the invoice to them in the same manner, or we'll have a payment schedule that is written down below. Same thing for a flat rate service. So if there's a flat rate, then we'll determine what those services are, and that if there's a flat rate, then there will definitely be a scope of work. There's something that I'm going to send over prior to that we have agreed upon that is within that rate. Anything beyond that will always have to be discussed and added. The client must accept the estimate before the services begin. So again, that estimate that I send separate from the contract will be attached to this, and it will be clearly outlined exactly what the expectations are. The client will have a schedule to pay of non-refundable payments throughout the duration of the project. If for any reason the hours change or the outside work changes, then there will be a rate of $75 an hour unless otherwise stated. So say you have an event. We agreed that your event was going to be 4 hours with 1 hour load in, 1 hour breakdown. So that's 6 hours total. If 2 weeks prior to the event, you're like, actually, I've changed the time of my event. My event is actually 6 hours and I need 1 hour load in, 1 hour, whatever. So now those extra 3 hours, because now it's a 9-hour event, I'm charging you overtime for that work. And that is something that's going to be in writing and updated in the estimate. Okay. Deposits, if there is a deposit or a payment schedule, then we'll list out what that deposit is at the time of signing, and that it is a retainer fee and non-refundable or refundable. Okay. So next up, so that is how I work out my payment process. Show list. And then come back over here. All right, and so then I also include that my payments are paid, that payments paid via ACH are preferred. So that means your Zelles, your bank transfers, all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, because there are really no fees attached to that. If payments are paid via credit card or debit card, they will incur a 3% service charge. And that is already included in my invoicing process. So that is an agreement that we have. I do have a late policy penalty. So if for any reason you are late more than 14 days, then I will charge 10% per month of any fees or invoices that still remain unpaid. So say you owe me $100. After 14 days, I'm going to charge you another $10, which is 10% of $100 for that month. At the end of that month, so you're late 14 days, you got another 14 days to pay with your 10% penalty. If you do not pay within 30 days, now for the next month, I'm adding another $10. Well, now it's $110 that you owe. I'm taxing on top of that. So now it's what $11, whatever 10% of 110 is, $11. Now I'm adding $11 to that. So now you owe $121 for that month, and so on and so on. So that is how I charge my late penalties. Again, I am completely understanding if there is a net 30 that is within our contract or our invoices, no problem. If this is a repeat client and, you let me know, hey, I just need to pay, I know my payment is due this week, but I need to wait till next week. If you're communicating, then no problem. I'm not going to charge you a late fee. But if you are completely ghosting me, I have not heard back from you, you have not been paying on time consistently, you're going to incur that late fee. Okay. I discuss expense reimbursement. Any mutual agreed upon services such as travel, miscellaneous expenses that are incurred by me, they must be paid by the client immediately upon receipt. If the service provider is subject to if I have to incur any type of emergency expenses up to $100 for transportation, food, supplies, or miscellaneous fees during the planning process, then I don't have to ask for approval of that. Should the expenses exceed more than $100, then I will make mobile contact and email for approval within 2 hours. If there's no response, the client will assume the expense of that receipt. So say, day of the event, I'm going to pick up your cake and you didn't tell me that you told the cake lady that you wanted to add another layer to the cake. And now the cake it was $200, now it's $300, and you didn't tell me. You already paid me the $200 to give to the lady, but now I got to come out of pocket and pay the additional $100 because I'm standing right there. I will do that, because you've agreed to. If for any reason you did not notify me or let me know that, I will try to reach out to you. If you don't answer, whatever the case may be, I'm going to go ahead and pay that for you. That's basically what that says. If for any reason you send me to go pick up something, I got to stop and get gas, I'm going to stop and get gas. I'm not going to tell you, hey, I got to stop and get gas, kind of thing. If I'm trying to pivot and, we got to do a rain plan and I need to go get you an umbrella or something like that, or if I need to get umbrellas for all of the guests, then I'm going to go ahead and get those umbrellas. And then I'm going to save the receipt. In the next clause is that any addition to the fees described above, there may be disbursements, expenses, and other costs that the freelancer may incur in connection to the agreement. Such expenses will be discussed directly through email upon approval. The client shall be invoiced for all expenses together with appropriate documentation evidencing such expenses throughout. I don't know why that says PayPal. We'll take that off. It just needs to say invoice because I don't use PayPal to invoice anymore. And again, any reimbursable expenses must be paid immediately upon receipt. I'm not going to take all of your charges and hold on to them for a net 30. No, you need to give me my money back immediately. Even if my final invoice or payment plan is not due to you for another 30 days or something like that, anything that expense reports, I'm going to send that to you immediately. I have my payment policy listed here. Payments should be paid via ACH, PayPal if you choose, check or Zelle. Tips will be accepted via Cash App or Apple Pay. You can also add tips on some of my invoices as well, so no problem there. We're not going to read through the boring stuff. This is just my status as a service provider. It lets you know that I am a freelancer, independent contractor. I do not intend to create any type of partnership, joint venture, or co-ownership agency between us. This does not mean that you are part of my business, that we work together now, none of that kind of stuff. If you want to read more details into that, it is on the screen. You're not going to, I don't get any type of benefits from you, no type of insurance, medical, dental, all that kind of stuff. That is in my contract. Client responsibilities. The client is responsible for paying all suppliers directly. All suppliers and service agreements will be between the client and the supplier. So I'm not putting my name on any of your contracts. Anytime we source a vendor, I'm going to put your name on the contract unless that is something that we agreed upon. So say you gave me a flat rate fee for certain services that I said that I was going to source. Okay, now that contract is between me and whoever. So the contract between me and my assistant, or me and someone else that, say you hire me to do a party and you pay me $6,000 just to pull off the party, and it's up to me to work within that budget for that. Okay, now those contracts are between me and the service providers. But anything outside of that will be between the client and the actual service provider. The client is responsible for paying those services as per the agreement. Suppose the payment hasn't been received within 2 weeks of being invoiced. In that case, the service provider requires the right to cancel the agreement, or to rebook with other parties with notice. So again, that means if I send something over to a client, they don't pay it, they didn't do it, or whatever else the case may be, if that service provider chooses to cancel the services, even if they choose to keep it, okay, let me slow down. If I send the client an invoice for services that they need to pay for, and they do not pay it within 2 weeks, then the actual service provider has every right to assume that we're not working with them. And if for any reason that does happen at that time, I have to either rebook them or whatever else the case may be. It is not my responsibility, and I do not hold any expectation or legal action for if that vendor chooses not to work with us anymore. All right. So for the services that the client is responsible for calculating travel expenses that are up to 25 miles away from my home. So if you do require me to come on site for anything and I got to drive 100 miles, then you will calculate the expense. You will take on those expenses for that travel. Cancellation policy. This is pretty standard. Any cancellations made must be in writing. Any payments that are listed are non-refundable. How I must notify when the date changes, all of that kind of thing is in writing here. It kind of overlaps with some of the other clauses that are up in the contract, but you definitely want to make sure that you say it as many times as possible in the contract. I make sure that my contracts are as clear and concise as possible. I don't want them not concise, as detailed as possible, because I don't want any type of confusion as it relates to being an independent LLC. And so, I don't want to take on any type of legal action. So I make sure that I cover my butt as much as possible. So, if for any cancellations that is listed here, upon cancellation, I must return any, logins, any information. I must log out of that, anything like that. That has been shared with the client. There you go. Cancellation by the client. The client may cancel this agreement for any reason within 14 days with written notice. If the client cancels, any earned fees will have to be paid in full immediately at the client's receipt of the invoice. So if they choose to cancel their wedding, any payments that have been made thus far are all mine. They're non-refundable. And then anything other than that that has not been paid that is still within the agreement will be sent over to the client immediately via invoice. Cancellation by a service provider. The service provider may cancel the agreement for any reason within 14 days notice. The service provider is not responsible for any events preventing the event from happening, such as fire, flood, earthquake, or any other natural human acts or illness. So if for any reason I choose to cancel because I see that there is another pandemic happening or something like that, I have up to 14 days to notify them. If they choose to still go on with their event, I'm still covered under the human acts or natural acts of causes that I don't necessarily have to put myself in harm's way if I so choose, because there is now a global pandemic happening. Okay. The next clause is just talking about limited liability. Pretty self-explanatory. I am a freelancer. Any dispute or legal fees in the event that any disputes arrive and that cannot be resolved by mutual agreement, the parties agree to mediation. If the matter cannot be resolved through mediation, legal action ensues. The successful party will be entitled to its legal fees, including but not limited to attorney fees. Okay. Severability. I hate saying that word, but like severance. In the event that any provisions of this agreement is deemed invalid or unenforceable in whole or in part, that part shall be severed from the remainder of the agreement, and all the other provisions could continue to be fully enforced. Okay. Legally binding agreement. This just says, hey, we're signing a full agreement, and then the agreement is done. All right. So that is just an overview of my general agreement. There are some different contingencies that I have based on whether this is a traveling group. So if it's like a destination wedding, I do include some of my travel agent clauses in there, such as, you're allowing me to operate on your behalf. You are allowing me to be your travel agent. So that means that if for any reason I source a hotel, you tell me to source a hotel, and I send you the pricing and information, and then you choose to go book it yourself, or you take that to another travel agent and book that. I have different clauses in there for that. As it relates to weddings, I have some, like I said, a few tweaks to the contract that just tailors to an actual wedding. But other than that, the format still remains the same. The details of a contract are still the same. So we went a little bit over today, but I did just want to make sure that I gave you guys a full detail of what a service agreement looks like for a vendor, and that we have covered all of the details. Again, should you guys have any questions, please comment below. Let me know. If you want to reach out to me for services, you can contact me at www.ienjoyevents.com or any one of the platforms that you are watching this video on. And tomorrow we are discussing venues. We're going to go over some venue contracts, and I'm going to pull up I'm just going to search through my email. We are not making this difficult at all. We're just going to search through my email and look at some of the venue proposals that I've received back. And we're going to talk through what some of the different options or offerings that they have, food and beverage minimums and such. So definitely tune in tomorrow for day 4. When we're going to be talking about venues. I hope that you guys have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.